Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Dissecting Fiction podcast. I'm Vinny Murphy.
And I'm Christian Cutlick.
And today on the podcast, we're going to do a little bit on The Mandalorian, just restarted on Disney+. We'll talk about the first episode of Season 2 and where we think this is going. So, Season 2 really starts kind of straight into it. Episode is called The Marshal, and it's called Chapter 9, which I like. I like that they're not creating a season break when it comes to those chapters, and it certainly more feels that way than a season premiere.
Yeah, it's still we still had that season break though. I like it conceptually, but physically, we still had that year-long break between episodes.
That's true, but it's this really is an episode that plays off of very much what had happened in the previous season, and also doesn't bother to sort of reintroduce concepts, which I think was smart on their part.
I liked how most of this episode was references to the Old Republic games.
I'm familiar with a lot of the characters and concepts from those games. I never really got into them, so it's always been a less direct relationship, but I heard that as well, that there's quite a bit of reference as far as the Krayt Dragon and the intervention of the Tusken Raiders.
Yeah, it's it's literally a plotline. The Tusken Raiders are very different in this, though. Should we recap the episode a bit for us before we get too far into it?
Yeah, I think that's smart. And, we'll say at this point as well, we're not going to do anything that we think is too speculative or things that are considered leaks that haven't been confirmed. We will speculate on what we think is going to go on forward. I take that back a touch. We might touch upon rumors of who certain people are going to be playing in the future. We're not going from any source here, so don't be afraid of spoilers you don't want to hear. In fact, I would say the only plot points I had spoiled for me were all resolved by the end of this episode anyway. So I don't really have any idea of what the other episodes could be specifically. But, if you haven't watched the episode yet, you may want to wait until after to do so. The episode opens up kind of where we left Din Djarin and the child at the end of last season. They're now seeking out the remnants of the Jedi. This is kind of an interesting thing because it plays into something that pops up in a lot of the other media where the Empire pretty successfully suppressed information on the Jedi. So even not too far after the fall of the Jedi, a lot of people really aren't familiar with what that really entails.
Yeah, I also think it goes a bit back to what the Clone Wars did too, and what a lot of other Star Wars media did is that with the Jedi Order, we see them a lot, but the average citizen never really sees them all that much,
Yeah, and I'm just going to say for our listeners too, from this point on, we're just going to say Mando. It's a hell of a lot easier to say. And if we don't say the Mandalorian, then it isn't confusing. It sounds like a different guy. He returns back to Tatooine to do this due to rumors about another Mandalorian being on the planet.
So after they do the obligatory seasonal recap, even though this is episode 9, the episode starts with the Mando going to some unknown planet that's pretty run down, and he's investigating an underground ring, and he finds the guy, and he asks the guys, "Do you know any other Mandalorians?" And he goes, "No." They're going to do a shootout, and he goes, "Actually, I do. Please don't kill me." And then he tells them, "Go to Tatooine, and you'll find another Mandalorian, probably, most likely." And then I kind of sigh because we're going back to fucking Tatooine again. There's millions of fucking planets in this universe, but it's always Tatooine.
But we have the reason, at least by the end of the episode, we kind of know the reason.
Yeah. It makes sense, but it's incredibly frustrating to keep going back to what's supposed to be a backwater planet whose main outsource is moisture farming.
We find out some of their other industries now, too. That informant being Gor Koresh, played by John Leguizamo, which is pretty great. The child and Mando go back to Tatooine. once again meeting up with Pele Moto, the suspiciously Ripley-like character from last season's episode 5, the gunslinger, of which we both pretty much agreed was the worst episode of the show up until that point. So I got a little worried there. I always enjoy pit droids, and they were around, so that was fun. But they get away from, I think, the mistakes of that episode pretty quickly in this episode. They do indulge in a little bit of comedy at that point, but it's really more of just a touchstone to show that, the characters are still there.
Yeah, I mean, also the person that's playing that garage is from Strangers with Candy, so she's mostly known for doing comedy, which is why she's mostly there. And I think the comedy here isn't that bad because it does contribute to kind of showing how the Mando has grown slightly since the end of the last season, in which he doesn't really mind the pit droids being around, but he's still kind of like hesitant around them, which, is nice, but it hasn't really played too much going forward in this episode.
Right. And she's able to also let him know where these rumors of a Mandalorian are coming from. It's a new city called Mos Pelgo, which we find out is essentially on the other side of the planet. I think it's interesting because I think this means that Tatooine's not that big. Kind of the way they play that, how large planets are is never super clear. He cannot fly there because he doesn't want to alert anyone, so he ends up taking a speeder bike and running into Tusken Raiders as he did last time, which was one of my biggest problems with that episode originally. But here they do what Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni seem to be very adept at, is acknowledging continuity and kind of moving on from the weaker points and making it stronger. Here, it's very much played the sort of cowboys and Indians way, where, Mando has already made these connections, and now he's a friend to the Tusken Raiders, and it kind of moves forward from that point where, like, okay, maybe that last scenario was a little ridiculous, but this is where we are now, so let's just keep moving forward.
Yeah, and I think it helps bring out the Tusken Raiders who have only kind of been briefly touched upon in media. And this is kind of where we get the more obligatory, the more specific references to the Old Republic games here, in that outside of the Old Republic games, the Tusken Raiders have never really been talked about all that much. And here we get touches of that, and, on the way he goes to this town. And I like how they kind of communicate in that he uses a little sign language here and there to kind of help, I guess, his bad pronunciation of growls and things like that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think it's also, supposed to be part of the reason that they're so difficult to communicate with. And there has been, I don't think misunderstanding is fair to either side on that. Obviously, the Tusken Raiders were not kind to the settlers on Tatooine either. But yeah, it is a nice little touch. I always sort of pictured them more as like having some kind of monstrous throat. Like, we don't really know what they look like. So I thought that those sounds were part of their physiology, which kind of threw me off a little bit with him doing like the kind of screeching. But yeah, they kind of do their best with it. And like I said, like, you get that very Western feel, which continues into his arrival into the mining town of Mos Pelgo.
Which is like 4 houses.
That's like those old cowboy towns, man. It looks good. That's how it's supposed to be. I get it.
Yeah, it's like 4 houses, but like people just get slaughtered here all the time. I'm like, have no idea how there's that many people here.
It's not very long before we track down this armor, and it belongs to one Cobb Vanth, the marshal of Mos Pelgo, a character who does appear in the novels.
Yeah, originally Mando came here searching for the other Mandalorian, and he found basically the deputy or the marshal, the titular character, the marshal of the town, wearing Mandalorian armor, but it's Boba Fett's armor. And they quickly get into an argument because the Mando wants the Mandalorian armor because this guy wearing Boba Fett's armor is not a Mandalorian, clearly. And we get some fun references about him buying it off of some Ewoks. And they quickly, even though it's about to start into a fight, they're quickly interrupted by a crate dragon eating a bantha. And that's also where we get our second clue into basically what is the Old Republic storyline on Tatooine.
Jawas, not Ewoks. I don't think Ewoks have money. Uh, but yeah, Cobb Vanth, played by Timothy Oliphant, who's no stranger to westerns, having starred in Deadwood. Once again, a character that has appeared in the books, I believe, for having Boba Fett's armor, which is awesome because that's another thing that this show is continuing to do, is really embrace that continuity. They run into this Shai Hulud-like crate dragon, of course, first kind of appearing in the original Star Wars as a skeleton on Tatooine. And there is a lot of your normal sort of working through the plot here, but the eventual idea is he strikes a deal with Cobb Vanth, who's really most concerned with defending the town, especially from the Krayt Dragon, but also the Tusken Raiders, that if they can get rid of the Krayt Dragon, Cobb Vanth will give Mando the armor. And this leads to them having this uneasy alliance with the Tusken Raiders in the area.
Yeah, basically they go out, try to scout out the Krayt Dragon, and they find out that the Tusken Raiders also want to kill the Krayt Dragon because it's been picking them off and they've been trying to appease it. And lately it's been getting hungrier and hungrier and they just simply can't appease it anymore.
Yeah, and we'll spare what a lot of our contemporaries have done with this episode. There are a ton of references in here. Mm-hmm. We don't really need to get into all of that. We're going to go kind of a different direction, especially because we want to talk about where we think this is going. Obviously, they do defeat the Krayt Dragon, who is very cool and spews acid. It's sort of, would you agree, a somewhat standard sort of action plot for that last 20 minutes or so?
Yeah, it's, they have a plan. The plan goes wrong. They make a new plan. That plan goes wrong. And finally, they settle on a third plan that actually works. And it involves some kind of level of courage and bravery. And it's kind of a typical kill the dragon plot. It reminded me a lot of like the Smog movies. But, here it's fun, I think, just because of how weird, I guess, the plans get and how quickly the plans goes wrong.
Yeah, and I think it is a lot of fun, especially, as I was saying before, too, we now don't have to be as concerned with establishing a lot of the characters. They're mostly there. Cobb Vanth, I think, probably gets the most development in the episode, rightfully so. And he's left in place as a character that they could come back to. Having like a cool Western marshal out in the middle of Tatooine, I don't think is a bad concept for anything. They do defeat this Krayt Dragon. The Tusken Raiders take the incredibly valuable Krayt Pearl from this, and some meat that appears to be good eatings.
Yeah, I'm serving. They're going to turn into a nice big pile of jerky that will last them for years.
That's true. They're out in the desert. You want to dry it out? That's a good idea. But the big thing that everyone's talking about is the appearance of a clone at the end of the show. I would say Boba Fett. I think thinking that it's another clone would be a bit silly.
It could be Fives or somebody from the Bad Batch. I don't know if somebody from the Bad Batch because those are probably the wackier characters, but it could be somebody from that group that Luke Skywalker personally led during the Clone Wars, because a lot of them did wind up surviving the initial wave of extermination when the Republic fell. And they do have more character development than, I guess, most of the clones. So my money right now is on Fives. I don't think it's Boba Fett. I think that would be pretty lame to bring him back, but it is possible. And the continuity of Boba Fett's very odd, though, because he is a Mandalorian, but he's also not, depending on who you ask in the Star Wars universe. Like, I think in the Clone Wars, they specifically say he is not a Mandalorian, but you could also write your way around that and say, well, he's not a Mandalorian because they kicked him out of the Mandalorian armor, the Mandalorian order, and he actually was born on Mandalore. It could be one of those weird retconny things.
I'm going to disagree with you here, pretty directly.
Okay.
Tamura Morrison, who played Jango Fett, well, effectively 20 years ago, and would be presumably what Boba Fett looked like under the armor as an adult, because he is a clone of Jango.
A perfect clone as well.
Yeah, has never gotten to play Boba Fett, which would probably be the reason you would take on that role. The other thing here is I can't help but go with the instinct that this season has to be a bunch of payoffs. They have to keep momentum not only for The Mandalorian going forward, but for all these other Disney Plus Star Wars projects. I think it would be a mistake for it not to be Boba Fett, because even if this ends up the last Boba Fett story, which I don't think it will be as far as time goes, you still want that payoff that you never quite get in Empire and Return of the Jedi. And yes, there have been books. Yes, there have been comics. Like, there's tons of things. But this is the first thing outside of the movies that the general public is really getting to consume. And I think to a large portion of the audience, this is the only real Boba Fett story that they're ever going to get. And that's why I think that's what it is.
I think that's a fair point. I guess on some level, I'm just sick of seeing Boba Fett all the time. We've had like 6 movies with him at this point.
But
on
that's
some
the
level.
thing, though, is like if you put it like I think our perspective is skewed because we see it as okay, you have Kid Boba Fett in Attack of the Clones. You have Boba Fett extremely briefly in The Empire Strikes Back, and then you have him for a good sequence in Return of the Jedi. For most people, that's where it ends. Even if they like the character, which most people do because it's just a really cool design, and obviously he's built up as this, just through dialogue, this equal to Han Solo. That's what I'm thinking, is this has to be the moment that sort of expanded universe type thought that is, so obvious to people who have been into the games and into the books for years that runs through The Mandalorian. I think you need that payoff. I think you need a character like that to show up.
Okay, I'll agree to that. That's a fairly persuasive point. But if it is Boba Fett, where does it go from there? What do you think?
That's where I'm not sure. I don't know if you make this Boba Fett riding off into the sunset or dying. I don't know if you make this the setup for, a Boba Fett series that could come up later. There certainly was something in development for a while at Disney that got dropped. It just came up too often to not be real, I would say. And Favreau and Filoni do not seem to be intimidated by playing with the big concepts. They both understand, and I think Filoni understands this largely because of Clone Wars, that you really can get into it, and if you pay a lot of attention and you work really hard and make sure that things are functional and are good storytelling, even if the story's not perfect, it's going to become accepted.
Yeah, I think and nothing from The Mandalorian so far has been like egregious or anything. Uh, my my concern is where I guess like Boba Fett fits in with the Mandalorian community, because the Mandalorian show has done a lot to kind of build out like these individual sects, while the Clone Wars have done a lot to kind of build out what the Mandalore community is on like a galactic scale. So, and in both cases, Boba Fett's kind of been a lone wolf. And if it is Boba Fett, he's just a clone of Jango Fett. And he wasn't really raised in the ways of the Mandalorian. So that's where I'm kind of interested in seeing, like, if it is Boba Fett, where this plays in, because the Mando is going to him specifically to talk to another Mandalorian about the Jedi. And Boba Fett has not had much experience with the Jedi outside of Luke Skywalker.
There's an interesting dynamic, and I think that's why you do bring Boba Fett into it is, not to repeat myself too much, but you don't really have that story for most people. They don't really have a Boba Fett story. And if that arc is Boba Fett dealing with what he saw the Jedi do to his father, while this guy who he probably does respect in some way is seeking out what's left of the Jedi, that's kind of an interesting plot.
Yeah, I guess, but I'm kind of curious where he's going to kind of direct them, like if what he's going to tell Mando about the Jedi, because so far his experience is only with, I guess, Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader on some level, though he's never really tangled with Darth Vader personally. I think at this point, Luke Skywalker's making the Jedi Temple somewhere.
We're stretching my remembering the timeline specifically. I think Ben Solo would be maybe only 5 or 6 at this point.
I think so, right? Because they said it's like 10 years after the Republic fall. It's not that long afterwards.
Yeah, I would. Is it 10? So he may be a little. He may even be a little older. So yeah, but we're definitely in what was intended to be the new Jedi Order would be forming. That said, what we've learned from a lot of the expanded universe stuff, the modern expanded universe, is that there were a decent amount of remnants of the Jedi around. So we may not have to directly encounter Luke and his students for Mando to find a Jedi.
Yeah, I think even because we already have rumors that Ashoka is going to be in it. And I think if that is the case, if this is going to be Boba Fett, I think maybe they'll find Ashoka on the way and then somehow that will play into it as well. Because right now the whole plot is to bring Baby Yoda to his clan, which is supposedly the Jedi Order or the new Jedi Order.
The heavy rumor, and this is one of the things that, we said we weren't going to get too deep into any type of spoiler things. Heavy rumor is that Rosario Dawson is playing an adult Ahsoka to eventually lead into a series. This is probably a good time to talk about some of the other actors who are in it and who they might be playing. Deadline confirmed from their sources that Katie Sackhoff is playing Bo-Katan, another Mandalorian. You also have Michael Biehn running around. There was a rumor that he's playing Baylor Valance. Probably not the most familiar name unless you've been reading the Bounty Hunters comic, which is pretty fun. A cool character, a little bit Terminator-ish visually, which I wouldn't put beyond them to cast Michael Biehn in that. And also another bounty hunter. This could really open up the door too in the series to something that a lot of people thought was going to happen in season 1, where a lot of the more famous bounty hunters who are still alive might pop up. I could see it going that way, but we have quite a few episodes to play with. We also have WWE's Sasha Banks playing what seems to be a fairly prominent character that we really don't know anything about. There's very clearly a lot that's going to go on during this season. I think the big question is, it has to be, is that Boba Fett? I say yes. I just can't imagine it's not. And then what's his interaction going to be here? Is he going to be following around, trying to figure out what's going on? Is he just going to walk up to Mando and introduce himself? We really don't know.
Yeah. I guess some of my spicier takes on this is that I think they're going to add more and more of the Old Republic stuff and even some of more of the recent comic stuff to this. I think HK-45 might make an appearance somewhere in this. They've already adapted quite a lot of the Tatooine plotline from the Old Republic, and HK-45 is a pretty prominent figure of that plotline in that he was just kind of in a droid shop and he turned out to be a very cool assassin droid. I do think they'll probably bring in some of the newer comic book characters into this because there has to be a point where this bridges the Return of the Jedi and the Force Awakens. My bet on that is probably Oichi Botan, who is also an assassin. He's a Sith assassin that killed Rey's parents, and he's been making appearances in the Darth Vader comic. That's kind of my prediction here, is that they're going to be bringing in more and more of these kind of obscure comic book characters to kind of bridge the gaps between the two trilogies and kind of hopefully explain what has been going on.
Yeah, it's funny. You immediately went to the Old Republic just because of the nods that are in this episode,
Yeah.
and the fact that they like to reframe old EU as they've done with Thrawn, who they've now once again made a huge character in this continuity. I think there's a good shot that we're going to see more New Republic as well, and perhaps Poe Dameron's parents, heavily referenced in a lot of the novels and comics, not so much within the films. I think there's a good opportunity there, especially because it seems like Oscar Isaacs might be the only one who's kind of still on board with Disney of that main cast. I wouldn't doubt something like that popping up. There's so much they can cover, and that's sort of the beauty of where this show is placed. Is even, let's say, this season ends up being very much devoted to a Boba Fett storyline, and maybe does close out sort of Boba Fett's role in continuity. You could come back in season 3 and just start exploring the New Republic. Like there's a ton of time to fill in, and a ton of things we haven't seen. And I'm very, very happy that this feels more and more like a live action Clone Wars.
It's not as campy as the Clone Wars was, which is why I really enjoyed the Clone Wars show.
I think, but let's be honest, like the opening of this was not a serious episode, and it wasn't a bad episode either. Whereas once again, that episode from last season on Tatooine, I really didn't like. I felt like super inconsistent. I think there's room to do all sorts of stuff, especially with the child being so like they use the child so much as comic relief. I feel like if you do it right, you could get away with kind of a campy episode that focuses on the child.
Yeah, they'll probably get to that too, because something I noticed early on in this episode is that the child is getting smarter living with Mando. Like when he goes to that bar, that underground bar, to find out where other Mandalorians live, like the child is pretty quick to like close his little pod thingy as he starts killing everyone around him. So I think we're getting to a point where the child is learning how to kind of live with the Mando and the strange rules Mando has. It was a bit surprising that we didn't get much of the child from this episode. I, while watching it, I kind of thought like the child would use the Force somehow on the Crate Dragon, but thankfully that wasn't it. And instead, it was just another wacky plan, which was enjoyable. But yeah, I kind of agree with you that this kind of leaves everything pretty open for the Mandalorian to play with. I think another strength of the Mandalorian is that it's not bogged down in continuity, in that it doesn't. It's not completely reliant on what came before it, but it will make smart references and kind of like flesh things out here and there, while also using that to flesh out individual characters.
Yeah, there's not. I think there's a couple of moments where you could accuse them of some unnecessary fan service in this episode. With smacking the back of Boba Fett's rocket pack and him flying off as Boba Fett did. But yeah, the strength of this Favreau Filoni partnership seems to be not just doing things to be exploitive. If you're going to use something, you're making sure that it's tying into everything, that it makes sense, and that you're going to use it for your storyline. Yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot we could get into too. Even just thinking with the child, we don't have a ton of information, which is part of the reason they chose Yoda's race, whatever that may be. I think, to my knowledge, the only other character of that race was Yaddle from Episode 1, and I honestly only remember the name Yaddle because I was like obsessed with Episode 1 when it came out. But if we're starting from a point where like we've only seen 2 of this race, maybe there's something to that too. Maybe there's some kind of connection to the Force where there can't be that many around. There's a lot to play with going forward, and the idea that maybe the Jedi know this and it just never really came up in the movies, I think is reasonable.
Well, I also think that whatever race Yodas are, they kind of also keep it secret on purpose, because I don't think even they really fully understand what they are. They just know they are a part of the Force. That's kind of what my guess is on that. Because it'd be
Yeah.
kind of ridiculous if they lived with the Jedi for like 5,000 years and it just never came up. They were like incredible, powerful conduits of the Force.
I mean, we're going to see going forward. We'll wait a little bit longer in between these going forward, too. We just wanted to talk a little bit about where we think this could be going as we move into the season. And we're going to be talking, I think, a lot about streaming in the next couple of months, especially with a couple of things that have come up in the last few weeks. But I think we're pretty good for the moment. Oh, we don't even talk about like the Darksaber. There's so much going on in this show that they could pick up and not like finish this season.
Well, yeah, if the Darksaber was still around, it makes sense that Bo-Katan would show up because that's an heirloom of Mandalore, right? That's like a family thing.
Yeah, and this is another point where they're tying very, very heavily back into Clone Wars and Rebels. If we get on-screen Bo-Katan and Ahsoka Tano in one season of this, I think that opens up the floodgates too. We could get anybody.
Yeah, I'm hoping for Revan.
I mean, I wouldn't even doubt anything at this point. Who knows what they're thinking? We have, 2 series going into production in the next couple of months? I think they said that Obi-Wan is like March.
Yeah, we'll see what they do with the Obi-Wan one because that will tie in too with this because it kind of seems like everyone winds up on Tatooine for some fucking reason. So, like, if they are planning on doing the Obi-Wan series or movie or whatever it is that soon, I guess it makes sense that the Mando went back to Tatooine.
Yeah, and for all we know, these other series are going to connect directly into plot. I don't know.
Yeah,
We got a lot coming up with them, and it's should be interesting.
it's a very different energy than what George Lucas had. Like, here is Disney making all these intricate interlocking shows, and George Lucas is just like, yeah, just make a Clone Wars, do whatever. You know, he didn't really care about like tying it in with the books or games or anything.
Yeah, we'll talk about that though. That's something when we do. We got some episodes on these coming up, I think, and we'll talk about Lucas and strengths and weaknesses. But I think that's it for this show. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe, rate, follow, share, do all those things. I'm not gonna, you know what platform you're watching on. You know what you can do. We don't patronize you here. Please check out toystoreguide.com. Help you find some great independent stores in your area. Support all your local businesses right now. Comic shops, record stores, restaurants, anything. There's all sorts of businesses. Hair salons. These are all largely independent businesses that need your help. You can follow us on pretty much all relevant social media. Just look for Dissecting Fiction, type it in. You got any final thoughts, Christian?
Check out Giga by Vault Comics that came in last week. I know last week everyone was obsessed over the new Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles comic, The Last Ronin. But also check out Giga too. It's about giant robots and people that live on giant robots. And one of those robots was murdered. So it's a murder mystery about giant robots and the people that live on them.
Oh, I actually have one. I have an indie this week.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. If you guys haven't checked out Rick Remender's The Scumbag, number
Yeah,
one,
that's a fun comic.
awesome, right? So much fun. That's my big pick. I got the variant cover because I'm fancy.
I think I got the standard cover.
They were both good. They're both whatever one you can find. I have a feeling that one's going to disappear on you if you don't do it quick. So get out there and buy it.
Yeah, people are kind of sleeping at that one. I think it just kind of got caught between a lot of big titles.
All right. Well, as always, I'm Vinny Murphy.
And I'm Christian Kutlick.
And thanks for listening.